What does it mean as a leader to be other focused? I know a lot of times we hear the word servant leadership, but my guest today, Andy McDowell, who worked at Boeing for many, many years and now has his own consulting company, who is leading the charge of helping leaders understand the difference. Sometimes, as he said, servant leadership is only focused on my team, where other focused leadership means no matter what, division to division, customers, other people in the organization, or just in your own life, your leadership now impacts so many other people. So I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. Also talking about his experience heading up major projects for Boeing and some of the struggles he had, lessons he learned as a leadership. And the key is he always is sharing very tactical advice to help you become a better leader. So let's dive into today's episode of You're in Charge, Now What? With Andy McDowell. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here, and I cannot wait to pick your brain. I mean, just chatting with you a few moments ago before we hit the record button, just really excited because I think we have a lot of things in common. As I mentioned, the goal of this show is to help people who find themselves in charge and they don't know where to turn. So for you, when someone is new in a position of leadership, what are some of the skills or things they should be focusing on first in order to put themselves in a good position with their new team or members of the project?
So for myself, biggest thing is culture of the team. So what kind of environments are you creating? Are you creating a level of emotional safety, particularly if you're coming into quote fix a situation? You've got to understand the underlying dynamics of what's going on. Is it logical, technical issues? Is it team dynamics? Is it they're over their head? They don't have proper guidelines or expectations. It was not communicated well as to the end goals and what we're trying to achieve with the team, and in particular, why is it we're doing this? I'm a big why person. So you've got to do some investigation, if you will, in this complex environment, because there could be, I just went through, 7 or 8 items, and I don't think that's an exhaustive list.
No.
of what could be underlying and why the team is struggling or underperforming or whatever. So you got to get to the truth.
Do you talk to the person? So in that situation, and I want to just unpack that a little bit. So if you're going into a situation, someone's bringing you in because either the team's underperforming and you're going to run it, or you're a consultant, you're trying to dig in here. Do some of those questions happen before you even get to the team, meaning talking to the people who hired you or are bringing you in for their perspective? Or...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You're trying to discover what the truth is, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Because we all bring our own biases and perceptions and so forth to what the problem is. So you've got to get through all the stakeholders, which includes the people that hired you and is bringing you in, or a leader within your company that's brought you in to try and fix the situation, to understand all the viewpoints.
Yeah, I think a good question I used to ask is, why am I here? Why are we addressing this today? Why didn't we address it 6 months ago? Why are we not doing it 6 months from now? Like, what was the trigger point that something bubbled up that you had to make a change, bring someone in, need some help? I think that's a very good question to actually start that conversation in a very easy way versus, all right, I'm the hero, I'm going to come in and save the day, and possibly not offending other people to say, well, you people are screwing things up and that's why I'm here. So letting them make the decision, they're bringing you in, let them guide you. And then you're right, you're probably, the more you keep asking those questions further down, you're going to find everybody has their viewpoint of why, and then you have to sort of sift through to find what you can take action on. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, and I have a living example in my own tenure at Boeing over this. So the Denver airport, which is named after L. Ray Jepsen. Jepsen got bought by Boeing. That's how I got into the Boeing world.
Mm-hmm.
Was struggling to get more efficiency out of the airspace in their airport, and was trying to bring in GPS, which is the area I was focused in within Boeing, was bringing GPS into flight operations.
Mm-hmm.
And the FAA had struggled on its own. I got pulled aside by the CEO of my division one day and said, "Hey, I'd like to give a gift to the Denver airport, since our founder was named, the terminal building's named after him." And so that's when I started digging. So the premise was not necessarily to fix an issue, but as I started wrestling with all the leaves, so to speak, to get to the core of the issue, I found out the FAA had struggled trying to bring GPS in. The airlines were frustrated that the FAA hadn't done it.
Right.
And by asking enough questions, found out that it had a common enemy, but there was a lot of finger pointing that was going on, and was able to facilitate a meeting group on both sides with all the proper stakeholders and get agreement as to what the common enemy was, and to understand each other's roles in flight operations. So
Right.
we eventually got controllers into flight simulators to see what pilots did when they're flying the airplanes and their workload, and pilots got to get into ATC rooms and see what the controllers had to deal with, and juggling multiple airplanes at the same time. And all of a sudden, with more knowledge in each other's heads, we were able to be successful in it. But without
but I
doing
love
all
that.
the investigation and so forth, and
Right.
understanding the true issues and knowing where the common enemy was, you couldn't really get everybody to the table and working together.
No, and I think that's really important. So for audience, I hope you're taking notes on this, because what it would, it sounds like, oh, well, we just asked everybody to get to the table. And sometimes that doesn't happen, but because everyone's protecting themselves, you're coming in with a guarded reaction. So when you're bringing teammates together, or especially different departments, you have this, well, I hope you're not going to blame me for this. And you come in very defensive, and you have to break down those barriers to just put the problem on the board, so to speak, the whiteboard over here. This is where we want to get to. And then listening to everybody's piece. But I thought which was really brilliant was having the different departments experience, or try to understand as best they could what someone else does, because it's easy to just assume someone's, oh, well, they don't work as hard as I do, or that's not important. I do, it becomes very self-centered, versus putting yourself in someone else's shoe for a moment and saying, well, where does their piece fit into this? And I need to understand that, because if they're doing their job really well, then it could make my job easier, or I'm a connector to them, versus this idea of silos. And I think we see that a lot in businesses, where everybody's departments are siloed off, and it's very hard to break those walls down.
Yeah, it was really about finding the win-win. So they have different drivers. So for the airline, it's all about the efficiency of the flight, particularly as it comes to fuel. Getting the airplane down from 35,000 feet down to the ground. Whereas for the FAA and air traffic control, it's capacity. They're the sheriff in the town is trying to juggle all these airplanes and have to do something relative to safety to get all these airplanes on the ground. And the two conflict at times. So a lot of the discussions centered around finding the common enemy was an identification and an acknowledgement they have different drivers in their business, and trying to find the win-win between it both. Can we find a way such that the efficiency of the airplane is maximized and takes advantage of all the equipment on board and technology, while at the same time understand what the controller has to go through and maximizes their ability to handle as many airplanes as possible.
Right.
And trying to avoid, if you will, the areas where conflict's going to occur and you end up with a lose-lose.
Right. I think that's important. That idea of win-win or lose-lose, and you have to get to a discussion point with each other to really understand what's important. I think the key, and again, I hope you guys are listening, that idea of what drives your business, because if efficiency is driving my KPI, so to speak, that's what I'm being measured on in terms of success is efficiency. Well, someone else may turn around and say, well, that's not what I'm measured on. I'm measured on end result. If you take it outside of, the airport, you might have a team where it's all about sales. And someone says, I'm only measured on the revenue that I generate. And someone else is going to say, well, you're wasting all these opportunities. So you're not being efficient with what's going on with the people who are reaching. You're just swinging for the fence. And because you hit a couple of them, you're a winner. And I think understanding ultimately what the leadership at the top is measuring. And you can't say, well, I want them both, because sometimes, as you said, and I think that's really important to understand, is sometimes there's going to be conflict because a lot of times it's how I'm compensated. The old adage is people just work their pay plan and they're going to be successful in that way. And you really have to understand then ultimately what's important, or can we somewhere meet in the middle? I think that's a really important skill to have.
And to a certain degree, it was also a mindset issue, particularly with the controllers. That we're coming in with a mindset of, we've been doing it this way for 50 years and it's not broken. So why are we trying to fix it? So we had to get over the mindset and show how GPS could really lessen their workload from that perspective and get some experience with the product per se. And eventually it got to a mindset of, don't you dare take my GPS away. And once the light bulb went on and went, wow, what a great tool for us to have in our toolbox from a safety perspective and a decrease in workload standpoint, it's like, why didn't we do this sooner? So you went from a pride, ego, why are we doing this, to a, oh my gosh, why didn't we do it? And a lot of it was just experience and information and an understanding of the tool that had been developed by the military, eventually got into civilian life, that could bring a lot of benefit to the table. So there's a lot of education on both sides.
Right. So I want to pivot just slightly now, because you've mentioned a couple in these scenarios that there are certain skills that those people who are leading these discussions need to have. And, I'd listened to one of your podcasts with you and your partner, talking about leadership skills, and each of you chose 3 that you thought were the most important. And one of the ones that stood out was this idea of, let me just read it because I want to make sure I get it right, other focused. And I think sometimes people get this idea of servant leadership, and a lot of these terms are just bandied about. But I liked better that language that you had, which was other focus, because sometimes when you say servant, someone feels, well, I'm less than someone else, versus other focused, which is, I think you were commenting as well, saying, you have to understand the other person, what they want, what their drivers are in order to be successful. Can you expand on that idea of being an other focused leader and why it's important?
Well, I think I like the term others focused too, much more than servant, for the reasons you stated, but also it's generic enough, if you will, to open it up to other stakeholders. So it's not, servant leadership tends to talk about the dynamic between a leader, a boss, so to speak, with their team. But by saying others focused, it opens that statement, if you will, to other stakeholders like customers, or other teams within your company that your team is interacting
Right.
with vendors that are supplying your business. It really becomes much more of a inclusive 360 kind of look that, yes, my team is important, and it's important that we be spot on with what we're doing. But while we're doing that, we're taking others that have a stake in what we're doing into consideration, as much as, what servant leadership connotates between yourself and your team, right? So it's a more all-inclusive kind of term, sort of leading with compassion and empathy to say, yeah, we could do this, but it's going to affect this team in this way. We got to go get concurrence and bring them in as part of the conversation, finding the win-win between our two teams. And then if we do that, then it's a win for our customers, as opposed to doing everything in a silo, not taking into account what our changes in the way we do things, whether it be processes or product or service, is going to do to these other people who are just as important in the company and in serving our customers. So that's why I like the term better than servant leadership. Is it's an others focused,
right? And it
who
goes
all the
back
stakeholders
to
are.
Yeah, it goes back to what you had started the conversation with at the very beginning, talking about culture. That's another word that gets bandied about, of like it's this miracle thing versus, that we can just go run out and like, I'm going to change culture. I'm going to put a great culture. When someone comments about a great culture, I think it's based on what you're just saying, is that, yes, I can be focused on my team, but when I pivot over here, I'm on someone else's team. I always say, if you're leading a team or a division, you're on someone else's team as well, meaning that, there's someone above you. And so you have to be open to all of that. And that, again, going that others focus is, what's the mission of the whole company?
Yes, that was going to be my next point. Yes.
Right. My piece fits into this. I equate it sometimes to sports teams, but I also like racing, with a pit crew. Everybody has that job to get that machine back out. And if somebody says, I'm more important than the other, that machine just sits in the lane and doesn't move forward. So you're right. It's this other focused where it becomes a mentality of, no matter who's in front of me, it's understanding that position and where it connects, so the whole machine can move forward. I think and I think that's how I love the way you're tying that into, culture is the end result of this versus the reverse, where culture, and then we try to figure out how to develop it.
And I talk a lot, and I'm just a big believer, if you're going to be influential within your own team or with the other stakeholders or other team members, you got to explain the why. And going back to the Denver example, it's finding a common enemy was really about finding the why of what we're doing and why we're doing it. We want a highly efficient, high capacity flight and ground operation that serves the airlines, who serve end customers, who serves our nation, that serves businesses around the world, and so forth. If you can put all that in a statement that everybody can agree upon, and find that why, you're going to be in good shape. It's going to be easier to get.
So if you give them that why, so again, just want to, for those who are new to this and even some experienced people, so you're giving the overall why for the everything, and then that allows them to back out their own why for their own piece to the puzzle, right? Am I hearing that correctly?
But I think that's where leadership tends to fail, though, right? So, with where I was in the organization with Boeing, always got handed the yearly goals or the yearly strategy. And the challenge for me was try and figure out, in these statements that tend to be up at 100,000 feet, where does the strategy and the reason why my team exists fit in that? And then also translate it to, for each of my team members, how are you contributing to that? So they see a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a sense of, okay, there's reasons why myself and this team and so forth are in the company, helping to achieve on the why. And I think that's where business tends to fall down, is not doing a good job of explaining that why. And there's a
Right.
tendency, particularly in the bigger corporations, where they develop these strategies, and the thought is, well, that's what my executive and upper middle management, whatever leaders are going to do. I'm just going to hand over the goods, so to speak, and say, here's our yearly strategy, or here's our 5-year strategy. Go forth and do great things. And everybody's sitting there scratching their head going, okay, how do we fit into this?
Right. Which is why that's exactly why I started this podcast, for those conversations, is when you are handed something and you go, well, great, now what do I do? And you guess. And I agree. I don't think you may not have to do it for them, but you have to say, okay, well, go out and figure your guy's strategy, come back, let's talk about it to make sure it aligns. Right. So I'm not doing the work for that team. But if I said to you, okay, this is where we're going. Here's how your team fits into this. You go think through what you think you're going to be doing over the next 6-8 months in order to deliver this, and then come back, let's meet and align. I agree with you. I think there's a lot of assumptions, because let's say you've been with them for X period of time. They're just going to make an assumption. Oh, he knows what to do, or they'll figure it out. And there's a lot of wasted time, a lot of frustration, a lot of guessing, a lot of failure that, to your point, is maybe a little extra conversation or one extra meeting to just validate the path you're going down would save everybody a lot of time.
Yeah, the conversations tend to exist in the boardroom. So instead of maybe an iterative process where the executives are getting together and thinking about a strategy, and then maybe before they officially release it, put it down 1 or 2 levels and garner feedback, because developing strategy is a little bit of an art in how you phrase these things and how you deliver it and how you're telling the story. Storytelling is a huge skill within leadership. So how are you telling the strategic story to those below you? And are you phrasing it in such a way that keywords or whatever can be picked out by any organization to focus on and allow them to contribute in that particular way? A lot of times it's all done with the, top dozen folks, and they're doing their own thing. Feedback is garnered, and it's not all right, Mr. Leader, sit down and think about what you think would be your strategic goals for the year, and provide it as an input, and it goes up, and then that's considered and so forth, and either agreed upon or not agreed upon or modified or whatever, so that you're doing as much listening as you are talking.
Right. But I think, and again, what I love about this conversation is you're right. That's exactly what happens. It sits in the boardroom. I remember one time I was working for an organization, and when I went out into the field to see how things were going, it wasn't going very well, because they said, well, you're sitting up in your ivory tower making all these decisions without letting us know down here. So I think, to your point, that one, we're not communicating it downstream. But I think the other thing that clicked in my head when you were saying this is sometimes we get too caught up in the story of it all, but then we're still leaving it for them to interpret that story and convert it into actions, right? They're guessing, well, what am I supposed to do in order to deliver on that? That's what I see a lot of times, failures of businesses, is we haven't broken the story into actions that the team can then say, okay, if we do these actions, we will generate these results. We will move towards fulfilling that story, because we get enamored in our words. We get enamored in our, those big meetings and pumping people up and talking, and everyone's clapping and yelling, and they still walk away going, I get the story, I just don't know how to do it. So I think, to your point, is one of the best leadership skills is, how do I convert story into actions so my team can then feel comfortable going, I know what I have to do every day, versus, oh, is that what you meant? Oh, I thought you meant that. And getting back to the frustration, getting back to the disconnect where we're not really moving forward.
I mean, it's also, one of my biggest frustrations at my time at Boeing was, I built a business from scratch that was strategic in nature. We were going out and doing things with governments, weren't making, comparatively speaking, other divisions, we were not a big money maker, but what we were doing was just strategically so that other divisions can make more money
Right.
than what they were. So I would get into meetings, and all the focus was about the organic growth with the big money makers in the business, and they were coming out with all these tools in the cockpit for pilots and so forth. What we're seeing now on iPads and so forth. Elimination of paper in the cockpit and so forth. And I would get in there, and they talk about these fuel efficiency tools and so forth and so on, and they were missing the one big stakeholder, which is the one I was dealing with, which is the government and the sheriff in town that's managing the airspace. And I'm like, okay, does your tool take any consideration or have any inputs from air traffic control in terms of the fuel efficiency? No, that's an FAA thing. That's an air traffic control thing. We have no control over that, so forth and so on. And I'm like, so you're leaving a major stakeholder out of the equation. And so how much do you think this tool is really going to help?
Right.
The people in the cockpit. There's a missing hole in the story. And so I could sit there and translate strategy and so forth and try and get my team on board. And then I turn around and find out that our story, our contribution to the cause and everything is not being considered in the other pieces because it's too complex. We don't want to understand it, even though I have a team within the company that does understand it. We could bring into the meetings and have discussions with on how an ATC function could contribute to the tool and have a really whiz-bang tool compared to what the competition is, so forth and so on. So you've got this silo mentality. If I don't know it and I don't understand it, then I don't want to deal with it. And then you turn around and your story starts falling apart.
Right.
Particularly in front of the customer, it's like, well, I was expecting more gains out of this product. It's like, well,
yes.
Okay, don't pay attention to the man behind the
behind the curtain over here.
Behind
Exactly.
the curtain, so to speak, because you really haven't dealt with somebody who's a major stakeholder in the problem.
Right. So let's pivot a little bit now. I'm really curious about now that you're, with your company, generate your value. That's the name of your podcast, name of your company.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about what that means. Like what's the goal? What's the story of your company, and why choosing those words? Why those words specifically? What do they mean to you?
I'm glad you asked that question, because that's the question I always end up with at the end of interviews with people on my podcast, is to get people's interpretation of what the words generate your value mean. So let me talk about some of my beliefs. I believe leadership comes from the inside out. When people ask me, what do you do? I say I'm a life, leadership, and small business coach. And I put those words in those specific order for a reason. And this gets into what you stated at the beginning of our time together about the overlap between life and business.
Mm-hmm.
So human beings have needs in this world: food on the table, a roof over the head, feeling like you belong to something bigger than yourself, to have love and relationships, and to be seen by people in this world. I can go on and list of 20 things, but it's all about needs. Businesses were set up to address needs in the marketplace. It started with the act of developing a currency, and then scales coming in that allow you to deliver things at a cheaper cost than somebody can do on their own. And business became available that were addressing needs in the world and society. So it seems that you could use business tools for strategy to start developing life strategy tools with some minor modifications. And that's what my methodology and the way I practice, so to speak, with my customers is from that standpoint. So if you're doing a 360 around your life, where are you helping with the needs of the world? What value do you as a person bring to the world? Whether it's through your business, it's through your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your kids, your relationships with your neighbor, church members, whatever role or facet you have in life. How are you contributing or bringing value to the world? Because I'm a firm believer that's when joy and happiness and success starts showing up in your life, when you start paying attention to those items. So it's really about looking at where are you generating value in the world, and where are you having difficulties with it that we can work on in your self-leadership. And then from you falling down and getting yourself back up and learning a lot of lessons and things about life and self-leadership, you can then use that to turn around and start leading other people in an effective way, that you get results because of your experiences and what you learned in self-leadership. You can do with other human beings, human being, from that perspective, and get better results out of your team and your business and so forth and so on. So that's where the term came from. I wrote a blog for a couple of years while I was still at Boeing with that title, and decided to set up my business that way when I got laid off because of the 737 MAX crisis, and wanted to go generate my value in this world. With my why and my purpose, and why I'm here on this earth.
No, I love that. I think that's a really important thing is there's a lot of times where people don't think they have value to share. They feel that everyone's smarter than they are or better at them. And, with social media, everybody.
Yeah, it gets into all human dynamics, right? It gets into self-esteem. It gets into your creativity.
Sure.
How do you deal with judgment and shame and all those type factors in your life? And are you truly living out your best potential?
Right. And I think that's hard for some people who haven't been in a situation where they have that support. They've always been told they're not good enough, or they just don't, for some reason, perceive they're not good enough. And as I was saying, with social media now, everyone's posting their best life out there. And so, I've said, I know the game of social media. And sometimes I look at this and go, wow, am I doing enough? And then I have to sort of slap myself in the head and just go, stop. Well, what's your why? Get back on track. Stop getting distracted with other people's lives. All right. So as we're wrapping up, because this idea of leadership, see, I think sometimes people make the mistake, and that's why I think that idea of generate your value is that I think there's times where people think they only have leaders are at business, or leaders are in a church. The reality is a lot of people are leaders in their family. They're leaders for their friends. They're leaders at their school. So it's this idea of circling back again to this idea of, other focused. That's the way you move through your life, instead of, well, now I'm going to go put my leader hat on as I drive into the parking lot of my business. So for those folks who don't really, maybe again, they're listening to it and they don't think of themselves as leaders, what would you say to them in terms of, yeah, you are, and here's why?
Well, I think there's a misconception that to be a leader, you have to have a title.
I love that.
And I'm a firm believer the number one job of a leader is to build other leaders, and you do that through influence. So you could be a member of a division of a company, have a title or a position that doesn't necessarily denote leadership, but yet be a leadership amongst the team. From their perspective. And I think that's not often looked at enough. When I came from a very complex technical company, and oftentimes you had people that are really good technical skills, and then they promote him into a supervisor position, they fall flat on their face because they haven't developed their influence skills. Have you put them in as like a team lead on a project without the
Right.
title, but to see how they do influencing and managing other people on the project from that perspective before you make that decision to move them over to a
Oh,
supervisor
and
or
that
management
happens.
position.
That happens in so many companies where,
Mm-hmm.
especially again in sales, a top salesperson doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the best manager of a sales team. I mean, look at Michael Jordan, arguably one of the best, if not the best player, couldn't coach. So, and to your point, I think when people have asked me, well, who should I be considering? And I would paint a scenario. I would say, okay, so who's leading the team right now? And they'd say, okay, Andrew's leading the team.
Mm-hmm.
He goes on vacation. He's away. The team's still running. When somebody has a question or they're struggling or they need help on something, who do they go to? Who's that person that's on that team? Because in my mind, if there's a common person that multiple people say, they probably have those inherent skills that you're talking about of empathy, patience. They're good teachers. They do know what's going on.
Creativity, thinking out of the box,
They're
trying
approachable.
ideas, not
All of those
approachable,
things.
not afraid to fall on their face for a minute and get back up and try again.
And I say that's a person you should start consider. Well, they're not the greatest at X, Y, and Z, but they're probably in the top 25%. I said, it's just that they may not have that focus on that one skill to be that but that's who you really want. And all of a sudden it opens people's eyes to people they never would have considered, just putting them through that exercise. But when they do put that person in that position, the rest of the team is happy about that because they still have that person that was approachable. They still have that person who has empathy, and they feel that we're going to do this together. Where sometimes those top 1%ers, it's a self-focused, not other focused, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And it's also understand, as a leader, the number one thing you're going to get graded on is results. And it's not saying anything about who's doing most of the heavy lifting in it. It's about an understanding of, okay, to get these results, what kind of skills or strengths are needed to be successful in getting those results. Knowing that and using that in your conversations with your team members to understand what are their desires and goals in their career and so forth, and then B, having the proper conversations to understand that. I once was not even involved in a conversation about replacing my boss, as a vice president, and they picked somebody else. I learned a hard lesson about how succession happens at Boeing, but I didn't hesitate to pick up the phone the next time I was in Denver and sit down with the CEO of the division, make an appointment and just ask the question, so what are you looking for out of a vice president? And he's like, great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I said, I don't know if I have an answer for you today, but let me think about it and let's get an appointment together, in a week or two. And sure enough, he was in town a week or two later and sat down with me and we had that conversation. But it kind of threw me back a little bit when he said, nobody's ever asked me that question before.
Well, because again, to your point is a lot of times people are waiting for others to tell them what to do, or they assume that that person in that leadership role is always looking versus saying, let me know what it's going to take in order to do this, to make the team, to be considered, right? If you're playing sports, you need certain skills in order to make a team, and you have to practice those skills to be considered to be part of the team. Why more leaders don't lay that out to say, if we're looking for this, here are the qualifications, here are the things we're looking for, here are the skill sets that we're looking for, and post it and let people who are interested work towards that to be able to
rise to the occasion.
Exactly. I put in the work. You told me what you were looking for. Here it is, versus goes back to that earlier conversation of the disconnect. One side's not talking to the other side. They assume the other person understood. And the other team is going, well, you never told me what you wanted. And there's more frustration versus, no, I laid it exactly out. Here's what I'm looking for. Do you have those qualifications? Do you have those skill sets? Do you have something close to that? If you don't have exactly it, do you have something else that we can have in order to have these conversations and move forward? So I think, it's a perfect way to wrap everything up, is talking about we have to do more conversations within our team to explain what we're looking for, interdepartmental, breaking down those silos to understand how we connect with each other, explain what our team does. I'll guarantee you there's a lot of people who don't have any idea what the other team does. They just know, oh, they're over there and that's all right, when actually they may have a big impact or need your help from your department to do their job better. And everybody's waiting for someone to miraculously just explain it or break down the barriers versus them taking it on themselves to say, excuse me, I need to understand what you're doing over here because I think it influences me.
Well, once again, if you're not having those conversations, you don't understand what value another organization can bring to your team.
Exactly.
You don't know what they're doing. You don't know the value that they contribute to the overall company. And therefore, you don't understand how they might be able to bring value to your organization, your product, or your service that you're responsible for, unless you have some curiosity and ask the right questions to try and understand that. I had that in a big way with another division that was sort of in my area within Boeing. And it wasn't until they came down and actually spent time with my team did they understand frustrations and why we weren't making progress in areas they thought we should be. When they came to understand I wasn't getting the support that I needed from the company, it's like you're just making assumptions as opposed to truly coming down and having a conversation and understand the fight that we were in to do the thing.
I think it's a great way to put a sort of a, period to this conversation, is that idea of making assumptions versus being curious. And I think curiosity is a key leadership for the truly great leaders. They're always asking the questions, why, what do you do? They're interested. It goes back to what we were saying before. They're interested in the other person so that the more I talk to you, the more information I get. And then I can put it through my brain to say, okay, does this affect me? No. Does it? Yes. What could we do with this information? And sometimes that person who's completely outside of your department, just because they're not buried in the day-to-day, they might offer some suggestion that could unlock something that you've been struggling with because you're staring at it all day. You no longer see it. It's so close to your face, you can't see it anymore. And someone just goes, why are you doing that? Did you ever think about this? And all of a sudden but if you're not curious and willing to ask, then it doesn't happen. So great.
It's a tremendous life skill.
Absolutely.
We've been talking a lot about business here, but curiosity is a huge life skill and mindset.
No, I totally agree. I think people constantly learning. My father-in-law is, good Lord, he's in his 80s and he's constantly, I think I'm going to learn a new language. I'm reading this book. I was always curious about this. I want to understand. My father's the very same way. He's going to be 90. He's constantly asking questions, and lo and behold, their minds are still sharp and they're still very active, because I think curiosity is a great engine fuel. So, all right. So as we wrap up, every time we do in this episode, so again, thank you, Andrew, for being here. This is great. We always throw out 4 or 5 questions. I call them the one. So it's just one thing that comes to mind. Again, completely random, but we get to know about you a little bit more. So first thing, I'm always fascinated because my son is 16, that 15, 16, 17-year-old brain going on. If we look back at the 16, 17-year-old Andrew and the Andrew you are now, what's the one thing that you can look back on and you would say, this is still similar, this is a trait that's always been there? And what's something completely different that the 17-year-old would never think that he'd be where you are today?
I think it's remained the same as kindness, compassion, those type things. What's changed? So in high school, college, early 20s, and it was my contribution to the failure of my first marriage was bad self-esteem. So difference today is obviously much more confident, believe in myself, love myself, all those type things that come with healthy esteem. But it's been a life journey from that perspective, where I got help, from a therapist, and reading self-help books and everything that curiosity brings to try and get myself to a point to truly live the life that I wanted for myself.
Great. Love that. Love that. So then, on the topic of books or inspiring things, what's one book that you've read or something you've listened to that's inspired you that you would recommend to the audience?
My favorite book is Start With Why from Simon Sinek. I'm a
Great
huge
book.
fan of Simon Sinek. Ego is the Enemy, Ryan Holiday's. Big Brene Brown fan. So,
Right.
and any of those thought leaders that's dealing with purpose and emotions and so forth, I'm a big fan of. Because I think in the past it was all just thrown under the carpet, and now it's finally being thrown out and exposed and talked about.
Great. Yeah. And we'll put those in the show notes too. We always like to keep a list of all the books that our guests recommend. Okay. Next one is one place in the world that you have not been to that you would like to travel
to. Australia.
Okay.
I was always sending, Boeing's big strategy items were China and so forth. So as the head of the team, I was always going to the main strategic pieces, and I got to send my team members to the fun places.
All right. So then on that, what's the one thing as a traveler that you always need or you can't do without? What's the one thing that you always have to have when you're traveling?
Camera,
or your phone camera? Doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't matter now with where the technology goes,
right.
But I've been a photographer since being a teenager. And so always like to capture my experiences from that perspective.
We do that a lot with our family. And I did something for my wife. Oh God, now is it 6 years ago? For Christmas one year, I put together a book of photos of everything we did that year. And she basically said, you're screwed. You have to do this every year now. So every year at Christmas, she gets a book of everything we've done. And it's great. One, you forget all the adventures you've had during the year, or they blend in. Also, you get to see the kids growing and changing and things like that. So that's also fun. And it becomes a legacy to hand down to, their children someday. All right. Last one. Talked about a lot of things, some really great information. And what I really appreciate about our conversation is a lot of tactical things that people can take away and write down and go, okay, let me try to apply this. As I said in the beginning, that's where I think a lot of things, and we've talked about it a couple of times, is we as leaders sometimes are not as clear as we should be. We assume people understand what we're saying or understand that story that we're talking about is going to generate what we think it's going to. So out of everything we talked about today, if you said, I hope the audience gets this one thing, what's that one thing?
Probably find the win-win, the others focused conversation, and finding the win-win.
Right.
Which then leads to curiosity and other things we talked about. But if I had one item to highlight, it would be that.
Great. Yeah, I think that's important. And again, it ties so much of what you talked about today. Others focus, you're putting someone else first. You're trying to understand that idea of curiosity so that we both can win. I think that's really, really important. So again, Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciated our time today for you taking some time. So tell the audience where they can connect with you, listen to your podcast, connect with you online. That's always important, that we want our audiences to reach out to our guests.
So the main place is my website at www.generateyourvalue.com. Showcases all my services and offerings. You can also access my podcast directly on the website. As mentioned, the podcast is Generate Your Value. It's out on all the major podcast platforms. We do it weekly, about 30 to 40, much like yours, 30 to 45 minutes, release on Tuesdays. And I'm on all the major social media platforms as well. Just search either my name or Generate Your Value, find us.
Great. So please, folks, connect. Reach out if you have some questions about what we talked about today. Andrew, I'm sure will, connect with you and chat with you as well. So again, you know the drill as we wind down every episode. Please make sure that if you did find value in the conversation today, share it out. There's someone in your network that could benefit from this. Make sure that if you like this, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, be it Apple or Android user, everywhere. We're everywhere as well. We're also on the YouTube. We have a video YouTube channel, so please go over there as well. I know there's a lot of places that you could connect and listen to some content, but the fact that you spent some time with both of us today means the world to me. As always, I appreciate it. And as I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge. But when you feel that, I don't know, what do I do? What now? What next? Please make sure you come back. We put things out weekly. We have these conversations with guests who are here to help you become the leader that you want to be. So thank you again so much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.